core message of the video. Maybe after everything we've explored together, you're beginning to see something differently, that the weight you've been feeling was never really coming from life itself. It was coming from what you were holding on to, the thoughts that kept repeating, the expectations that never settled, the past that quietly followed you, and the future that never stopped asking for your attention. And through all of this, you were still here, trying to find peace somewhere ahead. But maybe peace was never ahead of you. Maybe it was always here, waiting beneath everything you were carrying. There is a quiet wisdom in this, not something to force, not something to achieve, just something to notice, that nothing outside of you needs to change for your mind to begin to soften. As because the moment you stop clinging, even just a little, something shifts, not in your circumstances, but in how you experience them. From a Buddhist perspective, letting go is not a single decision. It is a gentle, ongoing practice, a quiet returning again and again to this moment, to this breath, to this awareness that you don't have to carry everything. And maybe tonight, when the world becomes still again, when your mind begins to move as it always does, you won't try to stop it. You won't try to control it. You will simply notice. And perhaps you will choose to release just one thing, one thought that doesn't need to be followed, one worry that doesn't need to be solved right now, one expectation that can gently soften. And in that small act, you may feel something open, a little more space, a little more ease. Not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer holding it all. And maybe that is how peace begins, quietly, gently, and one moment of letting go at a time. If these reflections resonated with you, you might take a moment to pause and notice what you're still holding on to right now. And if you feel ready, you're welcome to share your thoughts in the comments or continue this journey with us on Buddhist Teachings Audio. There are many more quiet insights waiting for you. And truly, thank you for being here, for taking this time to slow down, to listen, and to return to yourself. May your mind be lighter tonight, and your rest a little more peaceful. The invisible weight you carry. But there's something most people don't notice. Not because it isn't there, but because it has been there for so long, it feels like a part of you. A moment ago, you were lying in silence, watching your thoughts move without rest. And maybe you assumed it was just stress, just a busy mind that needs to calm down. But what if it's not just that? What if, beneath all those thoughts, there is something else quietly holding them in place? Something subtle, something almost invisible. Because not all weight feels heavy in the beginning. Some of it feels normal, like the need to be understood, the quiet hope that others see your effort, the small disappointment when they don't, or the way your mind replays a moment. Not because it matters now, but because it mattered to you back then. And somehow, it still does. You may not even notice it happening. It looks like thinking. It feels like reflection. But underneath, it's attachment. And attachment doesn't always feel intense. Sometimes it's just a soft tension in your chest, a subtle resistance to what already is, like expecting things to go a certain way, or holding on to how something should have been. And when reality doesn't match that expectation, your mind quietly holds on to the gap. That gap is where the weight begins. In Buddhist understanding, suffering doesn't always come from pain itself, but from the clinging that follows it. Not the event, but the way we hold on to the event. And the truth is, most of us don't realize we are holding anything at all. Because we've carried it for so long, we begin to think, this is just who I am. There's a quiet moment, maybe at night, like this. When someone sits alone, scrolling through their thoughts instead of their phone, they pause and notice something strange. Nothing is happening. No one is speaking. Nothing is wrong. And yet, there's a feeling of heaviness they can't explain. Not sharp, not overwhelming, just there, like carrying a bag you forgot you were holding. And only when you set it down do you realize how heavy it actually was. Have you ever felt that? That quiet weight? That doesn't come from the present moment, but from everything you've been holding on to inside it? Maybe it's an expectation you never released, a version of yourself you're still trying to live up to, or a moment you wish had gone differently. And even now, a part of you is still holding on to it, not tightly, but just enough to keep your mind from fully resting. The mind doesn't always need big problems to stay active. Sometimes it just needs something unfinished, something unresolved, something unaccepted, and it keeps circling around it, not to solve it, but because it hasn't let it go. And the more quietly you listen, the more you begin to notice it's not the world that's heavy, it's what you're carrying within it. Not your life, but your attachment to certain parts of it. And this is where a gentle shift begins, because once you start to see the weight, you also begin to realize maybe you were never meant to carry it this long. Maybe it was only meant to pass through you, not stay with you. And if that's true, then the question is no longer how to fix your thoughts, but something much quieter than that. What have you been holding on to without even realizing it? 2. Why the mind refuses to let go. But here's something even deeper. Even when you begin to see the weight you're carrying, there's a quiet resistance that doesn't want to release it. And that resistance feels almost automatic. A moment ago, you may have noticed how certain thoughts keep returning, how certain feelings stay, even when you're tired of them. And now, something inside you might be wondering, if this is hurting me, why can't I just let it go? Because on the surface, it seems simple. Just stop thinking about it. Just move on. Just relax. But the mind doesn't work that way. Because to the mind, holding on doesn't feel like suffering. It feels like protection. Think about it. When you replay a conversation, a part of you believes you are trying to understand it, so you won't get hurt the same way again. After when you hold on to expectations, it feels like you are creating stability, something certain in an uncertain world. When you keep thinking about the future, it feels like preparation, like control. But underneath all of that, there is something much quieter happening. The mind is trying to keep you safe, even if it means keeping you restless. In Buddhist understanding, attachment is not just desire, it is also fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of letting life unfold without interference. And so the mind holds on, not because it wants to suffer, but because it doesn't trust what happens if it lets go. There's a simple image that reflects this. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you keep your hand open, the sand rests gently in your palm. But the moment you start to tighten your grip, trying to control it, to keep it from falling, the sand begins to slip through your fingers. The tighter you hold, the faster it disappears. And yet, and instinctively, you hold even tighter, because it feels like the only way to keep it. This is how the mind works. It believes that control creates safety, but in reality, control creates tension. You can feel it, can't you? That subtle tightness in your chest when things don't go as planned. That quiet frustration when people don't act the way you expected. That restless energy when the future feels uncertain. All of it comes from the same place. Holding on. There's a small story. Someone sits alone at night, just like you might be now. They think about their life, the things they tried to control, the outcomes they wanted, the moments that didn't go the way they hoped. And slowly, they begin to notice something. Every time they tried to hold on tighter, they felt more anxious. Every time they tried to force clarity, they felt more confused. And in a quiet moment, a simple realization appears. Maybe the problem was never the situation. Maybe it was the grip. And have you ever felt that? That the more you try to fix something in your mind, the more tangled it becomes? That the more you try to control how you feel, the more those feelings persist? It's a strange paradox. The mind believes that letting go means losing something important. But often, what you're losing is only the tension, not the thing itself, just the struggle around it. And yet, letting go still feels uncomfortable because it asks you to do something unfamiliar, to stop controlling, to stop fixing, to stop holding everything so tightly, and instead, to allow, to let things be incomplete, to let thoughts come and go without chasing them, to let uncertainty exist without immediately trying to resolve it. And this is where the shift begins, not in forcing the mind to be quiet, but in understanding why it refuses to be. Because once you see that the mind is only trying to protect you, you no longer need to fight it. You can soften. You can loosen the grip, just a little. And in that small space, something unexpected begins to happen. The tension starts to fade, not because you solved everything, but because you stopped holding everything so tightly. And maybe peace was never about controlling your thoughts at all. Maybe it begins the moment you no longer feel the need to. 3. You are not your thoughts. But there is a moment, quiet, almost easy to miss, when everything you believe about your mind begins to shift. Just a little earlier, you noticed the weight you carry, and then the way your mind holds on to it, trying to protect you, trying to stay in control. But here is the deeper truth most people never question. What if the problem isn't just what you're holding on to, but who you think is holding it? Because right now, it probably feels like you are thinking these thoughts, that they belong to you, that they define how you feel, that they mean something important. But look a little closer. Did you choose your last thought, or did it simply appear? A memory, a worry, a quiet sentence in your mind that you didn't ask for, and then another one, and another. They come and go, unlike something moving through you. And yet somehow, you've been taught to believe that all of them are you, that every thought matters, that every voice in your mind deserves attention. But what if that's not true? What if thoughts are not who you are, but just something you experience? In Buddhist understanding, the mind is not a fixed identity. It is a process, a constant flow. Thoughts are like passing events, not permanent truths. But because they feel so personal, we attach to them. We follow them. We believe them. We let them shape how we see ourselves. And this is where the quiet suffering deepens. Because once you believe every thought is you, you can no longer step back from it. You become entangled in everything your mind creates. There's a simple image. Imagine sitting by a window on a rainy night. Drops of water slide down the glass, one after another. You don't try to stop them. You don't chase them. You just watch. Each drop appears, moves, and then disappears. Your thoughts are no different, but instead of watching them, most people step outside into the rain. They get soaked in every thought, pulled into every story. A single worry becomes a chain of worries. A small memory becomes a spiral of regret. And before they realize it, they are no longer observing the mind. They are inside it. Have you ever felt that? When one thought leads to another, and suddenly you're lost in something that isn't even happening right now? And the more you follow it, the more real it feels. But here is the quiet shift. The moment you begin to observe your thoughts instead of becoming them, their power starts to fade. Not because they disappear, But because you are no longer holding on to them, you see them for what they are. Just thoughts, temporary, passing. Not who you are. There's a person sitting in the same quiet room as before. The night is still. Nothing has changed outside, but something inside begins to shift. A thought arises, something about the past, and instead of following it, they pause. They notice it. They let it be there, without reacting. And slowly, it moves on. Then another thought comes, and the same thing happens. No resistance, no attachment, just awareness. And for the first time, there is space. Not silence, but space. And in that space, there is peace. Not because the mind stopped thinking, but because they stopped believing every thought. Not every voice in your mind deserves to be followed. Some are just echoes. Some are just habits. Some are just noise. And the more you see that, the less control they have over you. So maybe you were never meant to silence your mind. Maybe you were only meant to stop identifying with it, to sit back and watch, to let thoughts come and go, like clouds passing through the sky, and to remember you are the sky, not the clouds. And maybe, in a quiet moment like this, as your thoughts continue to move, you don't need to follow them all, and you can let one pass, then another. And perhaps tonight, there is a small space between you and your thoughts, where something softer begins to appear. 4. The subtle addiction to overthinking. But there is something even more subtle, something that quietly pulls you back in, even after you begin to step away from your thoughts. Because noticing your thoughts is one thing, but not following them? That's where most people get caught again. A moment ago, you may have felt that small space, that gentle distance between you and your mind, a sense that maybe you don't have to believe everything you think. And yet, some thoughts still feel harder to let go of. Not because they are louder, but because they feel important, useful, necessary. This is where overthinking begins to disguise itself. It doesn't feel like a problem. It feels like you're trying to figure things out, to understand, to improve, to prevent mistakes. And so, you stay with the thought. You go over it again, and again, and again. There's a familiar scene. You're lying in bed, the room quiet, just like before. Your body is ready to rest, but your mind returns to a conversation, something small, something already finished. And yet, it begins to replay. What you said, what they meant, what you should have said instead. And at first, it feels harmless, even helpful, like you're learning something, like you're gaining clarity. But slowly, something shifts. The clarity never fully comes. The answer never feels complete. And instead of resolution, you feel more unsettled than before. Have you ever noticed that? That the more you think about something, the less clear it actually becomes? Because overthinking creates the illusion of control. It makes you feel like you're doing something productive, when in reality, you're just circling the same place. In Buddhist understanding, this is a form of subtle attachment, and not just to the thought itself, but to the idea that thinking will eventually fix it. But some things are not meant to be solved in the mind. Some things are meant to be felt, and then released. But that's the part we often avoid. Because feeling is uncomfortable. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. Not having an answer feels unsafe. So instead of sitting with that discomfort, the mind keeps moving, keeps analyzing, keeps searching, keeps building more thoughts, hoping one of them will finally bring peace. But peace doesn't come from more thinking. It comes from stepping out of the loop. There's another quiet moment. Someone sits alone, just like before. The same room, the same silence. Their mind begins to replay something again. And this time they follow it. Just for a while. Trying to understand. Trying to fix it. But suddenly they pause. Not because they found the answer, but because they notice something else. The tension. The subtle tightening in their chest. The restlessness behind the thought. And in that moment, a realization begins to form. Maybe this isn't helping. Maybe this isn't clarity. Maybe this is just avoidance. Avoiding the feeling that sits underneath it all. Have you ever felt that? That sometimes you're not really trying to solve the problem. You're trying to escape the discomfort it brings. And so the mind keeps working, not to resolve, but to distract. And the more it works, the further you move from stillness. Because overthinking doesn't bring you closer to peace. It pulls you away from it, quietly, gently, almost invisibly, until you don't even realize that you've been thinking for hours about something that cannot be changed. And this is the subtle addiction, not to the problem, but to the process of thinking about it, because it feels safer than letting go. But what if you didn't need to solve every thought? What if clarity doesn't come from more thinking, but from less holding? What if the peace you're searching for is not at the end of your thoughts, but just beyond them? Because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for your mind is to stop asking it to fix everything, to let a thought remain unfinished, to let a moment stay unresolved, to simply let it pass. And maybe the conversation didn't need to be replayed one more time. Maybe the answer you were searching for was never in the thinking itself. Maybe it was in the quiet moment when you finally chose to stop. Sometimes, it's not even about the thought anymore. It's about the feeling underneath it that you've been trying not to feel. That quiet discomfort that you keep covering with more thinking. The sadness you don't name. The loneliness you don't admit. The fear you keep analyzing instead of facing. And maybe you're not overthinking because you need answers. Maybe you're overthinking because you don't want to sit in silence with what's already there. 5. Letting go is not losing. It is freedom. But here is where everything begins to turn, in a way that most people don't expect. Because after seeing the weight, after noticing the patterns of the mind, there is still one quiet belief that keeps you holding on. And that belief sounds like this: if I let this go, I might lose something important. It feels almost true, doesn't it? As if letting go means giving up. As if it means you didn't care enough. As if it means something valuable will slip away forever. And so, you hesitate, even when you're tired, even when you know the thought is exhausting you. A part of you still holds on, not tightly, but just enough, because letting go feels like a kind of loss. But what if that's not true? What if letting go is not losing anything real at all? A moment ago, you may have noticed how overthinking keeps you stuck, replaying things that no longer exist, trying to fix what is already past. And now, something deeper becomes visible. It's not just the thinking that keeps you there. It's the belief that you shouldn't let it go, that holding on somehow proves something. Maybe it proves that it mattered, that you cared, that you were right, that you tried. But here's the quiet truth. You don't need to hold on to something for it to have been meaningful. You don't need to carry it to prove it mattered. In Buddhist wisdom, letting go is not an act of rejection. It is an act of understanding. It is the moment you realize, this no longer serves me, and you allow it to pass. Not with force, not with resistance, but with clarity. There's a simple scene. Someone sits in the same quiet room, the same night. The same thoughts begin to rise again. A memory, a regret, a quiet tension they've carried for a long time. And for a moment, they almost follow it again. Almost. But this time, something feels different. They pause. Not to analyze, not to fix, just to notice. And in that pause, a gentle question appears. What if I don't need to hold this anymore? Not because it didn't matter, but because it's already over. And slowly, something softens. The grip loosens. The thought is still there, but it no longer feels as heavy because they are no longer holding it the same way. Have you ever felt that? That small shift, when something that once felt overwhelming suddenly feels lighter? Not because it changed, but because your relationship to it changed. This is the quiet power of letting go. It doesn't erase the past. It doesn't deny what happened. It simply releases the extra weight you've been adding to it. And here is the paradox. The more you chase peace, the further it seems to move away. Because chasing is another form of holding, another form of tension. But the moment you stop chasing, the moment you stop trying to force your mind into calm, something unexpected happens. Peace begins to appear on its own, not as something you created, but as something that was already there, hidden beneath the effort, beneath the control, beneath the need to hold everything together. There's another quiet realization. The person sitting in that room, they didn't find peace by solving everything. They didn't find it by thinking more clearly. They found it in the moment they stopped trying so hard, when they allowed things to be unfinished, unresolved, uncontrolled, and instead of breaking, they softened. And in that softness, there was space. And in that space, there was relief. So maybe letting go is not weakness. Maybe it's the moment you stop fighting what no longer needs to be held. Maybe it's the quiet courage to allow life to move as it is, without trying to control every part of it. And maybe you don't need to carry everything just because it once belonged to you, because some things were never meant to stay. They were meant to pass through you, to teach you something, and then to leave. And what remains is not loss, but lightness. And perhaps the peace you've been searching for was never waiting at the end of your effort, but in the moment you finally chose to let go. 6. Micro-practice, watching without holding. And this is where something gentle begins to change. Not by understanding more, but by doing less. A moment ago, you saw how letting go isn't about losing anything real, how peace begins to appear when you stop chasing it. But now, a quiet question naturally arises. How do you actually let go? When the thoughts keep coming back? Because it's one thing to understand this, and another to experience it. So instead of trying to force your mind to be still, let's try something softer, something you can do right now, without effort. If you're lying down, just allow your body to settle a little more into the surface beneath you. No need to adjust too much. No need to do it perfectly. Just notice. Notice your breathing, the natural rhythm of it. You don't have to control it. Just feel it as it is. And as you rest here, you may notice that your mind is still active. Thoughts are still appearing. That's okay. Let them come. Now here is the shift. Instead of following the thought, just notice that it's there, like you're sitting quietly, watching something pass by. A sentence appears in your mind. You don't push it away. You don't hold on to it. You just see it. And then, you let it move on? Another thought comes. Maybe it tries to pull your attention. Maybe it feels important. But again, you don't engage. You don't argue with it. You don't try to finish it. You simply watch. Like clouds moving slowly across the sky, each one appearing, shifting, and disappearing on its own. You don't need to clear the sky. You don't need to stop the clouds. Just let them pass. At first, you may find yourself getting pulled into a thought again. That's natural. The moment you notice it, that's already awareness. And gently, you return to watching. No frustration, no judgment, just returning. There's no goal here. You're not trying to empty your mind. You're not trying to become perfectly calm. You're simply creating space between you and what's passing through your mind. And in that space, something begins to soften. The thoughts don't disappear instantly, but they lose their urgency. They lose their weight. Because you are no longer holding on to them. There's a quiet image. Someone sits by a window at night. The sky is filled with moving clouds. They don't try to change the sky. They don't chase the clouds. They simply watch. And slowly, the movement becomes peaceful. Not because it stopped, but because they stopped interfering. This is the same with your mind. You don't need to control every thought. You don't need to fix every feeling. You only need to see them without holding. Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop resisting a thought, it begins to fade on its own? That's not because you pushed it away, but because you stopped feeding it. This is the quiet power of awareness. Not force, not control, just presence. And as you continue to rest here, you may begin to feel something subtle, a small distance between you and the noise, a lightness where there was tension before. Not complete silence, but something softer than before. And maybe, in a quiet moment like this, you don't need to quiet your mind completely. You only need to stop holding on to every thought that passes through it. And perhaps tonight, as your thoughts continue to come and go, you can simply watch, without holding, and see what gently begins to change. 7. The pain of holding on to what should have been. But there is a kind of pain that feels even quieter than overthinking, and somehow even harder to let go of. It doesn't come from what is happening right now. It comes from something that never happened at all. A moment ago, you were learning to watch your thoughts, to let them pass without holding. And maybe, for a brief moment, there was space. But then, certain thoughts feel different, heavier, not because they are louder, but because they carry something unfinished. A memory, a decision, a moment in your life that could have gone another way. And suddenly, your mind doesn't just observe anymore. It returns, not to what is, but to what should have been. Have you ever noticed that? How the mind quietly creates another version of reality. One where things worked out differently, now where you said the right thing, chose the better path, didn't lose what you lost. And in that imagined version, everything feels just a little more peaceful. But then you come back to the present, and there's a gap, a subtle tension between what is and what you wish it had been. And that tension is where so much quiet suffering lives, because the mind doesn't just remember the past, it resists it, it replays it, not to understand, but to rewrite. And when it can't rewrite it, it holds on to the pain instead. In Buddhist wisdom, this is one of the deepest forms of attachment. Not just attachment to things or people, but attachment to an idea of how life should have unfolded. And the truth is, this kind of attachment is invisible. You can go through your day, you can smile, you can function, and yet, somewhere inside, you're still holding on to a different version of your life. There's a quiet scene. Someone sits alone at night, not thinking loudly, not overwhelmed, just still. And out of nowhere, a memory surfaces. Something small, something from years ago. And along with it, a feeling. Not sharp pain, not even sadness, just a quiet sense of, it could have been different. And for a moment, they stay there, not moving, not reacting, just sitting with that feeling. And slowly, they begin to see something. It's not the past that's hurting them. It's the way they're still holding on to it, still comparing, still wishing, still resisting what has already become real. Have you ever felt that? That sometimes the most painful thing is not what happened, but what didn't happen. The life you imagined, the outcome you hoped for, the version of yourself you thought you would become. And even now, a part of you is still holding on to it, not because you want to suffer, but because letting go feels like accepting that it's truly gone. And that's the part that feels heavy. Because acceptance doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like loss. But here is the quiet shift. Acceptance is not saying, "This is what I wanted." It is saying, "This is what is." And in that simple acknowledgement, something begins to soften. Not immediately, not all at once, but gently. Because the moment you stop arguing with reality, you stop creating that inner tension. The gap begins to close. And what remains is not the version of life you imagined, but the one you are actually living. And maybe, for the first time, you can begin to meet it fully, without comparison, without resistance, just as it is. There's a question that sits quietly here. What version of reality are you still holding on to? And how much of your energy is going into trying to keep it alive? Because maybe peace is not found in fixing the past. Maybe it's found in no longer needing it to be different. And maybe the life in front of you has been waiting, not for you to change it, but for you to finally stop resisting it. There's a moment when you suddenly realize you're not just remembering the past, you're still living inside it, still carrying a version of life that no longer exists, still hoping in some quiet way that it could return. And maybe that's why it hurts. Not because it happened, but because a part of you never really let it end. 8. Peace is already here beneath the noise. But here is something most people spend their whole lives overlooking, not because it is hidden, but because they are always looking somewhere else. After everything you've just seen, the weight you carry, the way the mind holds on, the quiet pain of what should have been, it's easy to believe that peace is something far away, something you need to reach, something you need to fix yourself to deserve. But what if peace was never something you had to create at all? What if it has been here the entire time, just beneath everything you've been holding on to? A moment ago, you may have felt how resistance creates tension, how attachment keeps the mind moving. And now, something softer begins to reveal itself. It's not about adding more calm. It's not about forcing silence. It's about seeing what happens. When the noise begins to settle, there's a simple image. Imagine the sky on a cloudy day. The clouds move constantly, shifting, changing, covering everything. And if you only look at the clouds, it feels like the sky itself is restless. But the sky was never disturbed. It was always still, just hidden behind the movement. Your mind is the same. Thoughts are like clouds. They come and go. Some are light. Some are heavy. Some stay longer than others. But beneath all of them, there is something that doesn't move, something that doesn't react, something quiet. And that quiet is what you've been searching for. Not somewhere else, not in the future, right here. But most people never notice it because they are too focused on the clouds, trying to control them, trying to clear them, trying to create the perfect sky. But the sky was never the problem. Have you ever noticed that there are brief moments when your mind naturally becomes still? Not because you forced it, but because for a second, you stopped interfering. Maybe it happens when you're watching something simple, or when you pause without thinking about what comes next. A small gap, and in that gap, there is no struggle, no tension, just presence. That presence is not something you created. It was already there. You just stopped covering it. There's a quiet scene again. The same person sits by the window at night. The thoughts are still there. The memories, the questions, the unfinished pieces. Nothing has completely disappeared, but something feels different. They are no longer trying to fix everything, no longer trying to control every thought. And because of that, the noise begins to soften, not all at once, but gently, like a room becoming quieter, not because everything stopped, but because nothing is being amplified anymore. And in that quiet, something becomes noticeable, not something new, but something that was always there, as a sense of ease, a softness in the body, a stillness that doesn't need to be forced. Have you ever felt that? That moment when nothing is resolved, but somehow everything feels okay? That's not because your life suddenly became perfect. It's because, for a moment, you stopped adding resistance to it. In Buddhist understanding, peace is not something you build. It is something you uncover, not by doing more, but by holding less, not by controlling the mind, but by no longer clinging to every movement within it. And this is where the shift becomes real. You don't need to fix every thought. You don't need to solve every feeling. You don't need to create a perfect inner world. You only need to see what remains when you stop interfering. Because underneath all the noise, underneath all the effort, there is already a quiet place, and it has always been there, waiting. Not for you to find it somewhere else, but for you to stop covering it. And maybe that peace is not something you reach. Maybe it's something you return to the moment you stop trying so hard to create it. 9. The gentle art of acceptance. But there is one final shift that quietly changes everything. Not by removing your thoughts, not by fixing your past, not even by trying to feel better, but by allowing something that most people spend their lives avoiding. Acceptance. A moment ago, you may have sensed that peace is already here, beneath the noise, beneath the effort. But there is still something that keeps the noise alive, something subtle, resistance. That quiet feeling inside that says, this shouldn't be happening. This isn't how it was supposed to be. I need this to change before I can feel okay. And without realizing it, that resistance becomes tension. You can feel it in your body, a tightness in your chest, a restlessness in your thoughts, a quiet discomfort that doesn't fully go away. Because the mind is still pushing against reality, still trying to reshape it into something else. But here is the deeper truth. Acceptance is not approval. It doesn't mean you agree with what happened. It doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It simply means you stop fighting what already is. And in that moment, something begins to release. Because what you resist stays, but what you allow softens. There's a quiet scene again. The same person sits in the stillness of the night. Nothing has changed around them. The same thoughts return, the same memories, the same unresolved pieces of life. But this time, they don't push them away. They don't try to fix them. They don't argue with them. They just let them be there. A feeling rises in the chest. Instead of analyzing it, they sit with it. A memory appears. Instead of replaying it, they acknowledge it. And slowly, the energy of it begins to shift. Not because the situation changed, but because the resistance is no longer there. Have you ever noticed that? That when you stop fighting a feeling, it begins to lose its intensity. Not instantly, but gradually, like a wave that rises and then falls on its own. But when you resist it, you keep it alive. You give it more energy, more attention, more space to stay. This is why acceptance feels so powerful. and at the same time, so difficult. Because it asks you to do something unfamiliar, to sit with what is uncomfortable without trying to escape it, to allow things to be incomplete, unresolved, imperfect, and to trust that they don't need to be fixed right now. There's a moment. Someone remembers something painful, a past mistake, a missed opportunity, a version of themselves they wish they had been. And instead of turning away from it, they stay. They feel the weight of it, but they don't add anything to it. No judgment, no story, no resistance, and something unexpected happens. The feeling begins to soften, not disappear, but soften, because it is no longer being held so tightly. Have you ever tried that? Not fixing, not avoiding, just allowing. Because maybe the reason something feels so heavy is not because of what it is, but because of how tightly you've been holding it in place. And maybe you don't need to force yourself to feel peace. Maybe you only need to stop resisting what you feel. Because in the absence of resistance, peace has space to emerge, not as something you created, but as something that was always waiting. And in a quiet moment like this, you don't have to change anything right away. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to solve everything tonight. You can simply sit and allow things to be as they are. And maybe, in that gentle allowing, something inside you begins to loosen. Something begins to breathe again. And without forcing it, you start to feel just a little lighter. 10. Micro practice, letting go before sleep. And now, there is a quiet moment where all of this can become real for you, not as an idea, not as something to understand, but as something you can gently experience, right here, tonight. You've already seen how the mind holds on, how thoughts repeat, how resistance creates tension, and maybe you've also felt that small space when you stop holding so tightly. So now, instead of trying to quiet your mind completely, let's do something even softer. Let's begin with your body. If you're lying down, just notice the surface beneath you, the way your body is being supported, without effort. You don't have to hold yourself up. You don't have to stay alert. Just let the weight of your body sink a little more. And then, gently, bring your attention to your breath. Not to control it, not to change it, just to feel it. The air moving in and out. Slow, natural. And as you stay here, your mind will still move. Thoughts will come. That's okay. Now, instead of following them, try something simple. Just notice one thought, any thought that appears, and quietly name it, not in detail, just softly. Thinking, or remembering, or worrying. No judgment, no analysis, just a gentle recognition. And then, let it pass. You don't need to finish it. You don't need to understand it. Just let it move on, like everything else. Another thought may come. Do the same thing. Notice it, name it, lightly, and release it. This isn't about stopping your thoughts. It's about changing your relationship to them. Because each time you notice a thought and don't hold on to it, you loosen the grip. You create space. There's a quiet image. Someone lies in bed, just like you. The room is still. The night is calm. Their mind begins to move, as it always does. But this time, they don't follow every thought. They don't try to fix the past. They don't try to control the future. They simply notice. This is a thought, and this one too. And slowly, something begins to shift. Not because the thoughts disappear, but because they are no longer being held. And in that, there is relief. Now gently, bring your attention back to your body again. Notice your shoulders. Are they holding tension? If so, just allow them to soften, not by force, just by noticing. Then your jaw, your forehead, let them relax, just a little. And as your body begins to soften, your mind may begin to follow. Because sometimes you don't need to wait for your mind to finish thinking. Before you rest, you can let your body rest first. You can allow yourself to soften, even while thoughts are still moving. Have you ever noticed that your body can be at ease, even when your mind isn't fully quiet? And that sometimes, when the body lets go, the mind slowly does too. Now, there's one more gentle step. If there's something you've been holding on to tonight, a thought, a worry, a memory, you don't need to solve it. You don't need to understand it. Just acknowledge it silently to yourself. I'm holding on to this. And then, softly, I can let this rest for now. Not forever, not completely, just for now. Let it sit beside you. Instead of inside you, let it be there, without carrying it, and feel what happens. You may notice a small shift, a little less pressure, a little more space. Not perfect peace, but something gentler. And that is enough, because this is not about reaching a final state. It's about allowing small moments of release, again and again, until holding on no longer feels necessary. And maybe tonight, you don't need to solve everything before you sleep. You don't need to finish every thought. You don't need to figure everything out. You can simply rest while things remain unfinished. You can let your body soften, even if your mind is still moving. And slowly, without forcing it, you may begin to drift, not because everything is resolved, but because you are no longer holding everything so tightly. And in this quiet moment, you don't need to go any further. You don't need to understand more. You don't need to fix anything else. Just this breath, this body, this moment without holding. Let everything else wait. Let everything else be unfinished. And for now, just be here without carrying anything at all. 11. When you stop holding, life feels lighter. And then, something very quiet begins to change. Not all at once, not in a dramatic way, but in a way you can feel, before you can even explain it. After everything you've seen, the weight, the holding, the resistance, and the small moments of letting go, you may begin to notice something different, not in your life, but in how your life feels. Because here's the part most people don't expect. Your life doesn't need to change for your experience of it to become lighter. A moment ago, you were learning to soften, to allow thoughts to come and go, to stop holding everything so tightly. And maybe there was a small sense of relief, not because everything was resolved, but because you were no longer carrying it in the same way. And that's where the shift begins. Not outside, but inside. There's a quiet morning. Someone wakes up. The same room, the same responsibilities, the same unfinished parts of life. Nothing has been magically fixed, but something feels different. There is no immediate heaviness in the chest, no rush of thoughts pulling them into the past or the future, just a simple awareness of being here. And for a moment, that is enough. Have you ever experienced that rare kind of morning when your mind doesn't immediately start running? When you don't feel the need to fix everything right away? It doesn't happen because life suddenly became perfect. It happens because something inside you has loosened. Because the weight you were carrying is no longer being held the same way. And when you stop holding, life begins to feel lighter. Not because problems disappear, but because you are no longer adding extra tension to them. In Buddhist understanding, and suffering is not just in what happens, but in how tightly we cling to it. And when that clinging softens, even slightly, the experience of life changes. There's another moment. The same person from before goes through their day. They face something unexpected, a delay, a misunderstanding, a moment that, in the past, would have triggered frustration. And for a second, the old reaction begins to rise. But then, something pauses, not forcefully, just naturally. They notice the feeling. They don't resist it. They don't build a story around it. And slowly, it passes. Not completely gone, but lighter. And they continue their day without carrying it forward. Have you ever felt that? That moment when something could have stayed with you, but didn't? Because you didn't hold on to it? That's the difference. Not in the event, but in the holding. Because when you stop holding, you also stop accumulating. You stop stacking one thought on top of another, one feeling on top of another, and instead, each moment is allowed to pass, cleanly, lightly. There's a quiet truth here. Peace doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from not carrying everything. And when you begin to live this way, even in small moments, life feels different. Not perfect, but lighter, more spacious, more breathable. And that lightness doesn't come from outside. It comes from within. From the way you meet each moment, from the way you allow things to pass, instead of holding them in place. And maybe you don't need to wait for a perfect life to feel at ease. Maybe you only need to stop carrying what was never meant to stay. Because the more you release, the more space you create. And in that space, life begins to feel softer, simpler, lighter. And perhaps this lightness has always been available to you, not at the end of fixing everything, but in the quiet moment you choose to finally let go. 12. The freedom of an unclenched mind. And in the end, there is one final realization that quietly changes everything. Not something you force, not something you achieve, but something you begin to notice when you stop holding so tightly. A moment ago, you felt how life becomes lighter, how the same world can feel different when you are no longer carrying everything inside it. And now, something even deeper becomes clear. Peace is not the absence of thought. It is the absence of resistance. Because many people believe that a peaceful mind is an empty one, a silent one, a mind with no thoughts, no movement, no disturbance. But that's not how the mind works. Thoughts will still come. Feelings will still arise. Life will still move in unpredictable ways. And yet, there is a way to be at peace within all of it. And not by stopping the mind, but by unclenching from it. Because the real tension was never in the thoughts themselves. It was in the grip, the subtle holding, the quiet need to control, to fix, to resolve everything. And when that grip softens, the mind doesn't become empty. It becomes free. There's a quiet image. Someone is sitting in the same room again, the same night, the same life. Thoughts are still moving through their mind. A memory appears, a plan for tomorrow, a fleeting worry. But something is different now. They are not pulled into it. They don't follow every thought. They don't resist what arises. They simply let it be. And because of that, everything feels lighter. Not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is being held. Have you ever felt that? A moment when your mind is still active, but you are not caught inside it? When thoughts come and go, but they don't disturb you the same way. That is what it means to have an unclenched mind. Not empty, not perfect, just unburdened. In Buddhist understanding, freedom is not something you find outside. It is not in a perfect life, not in having everything go your way. It is in the absence of inner resistance. The moment you stop fighting what is, the moment you stop holding on to what has passed, the moment you stop trying to control what hasn't happened yet, that is where freedom begins. Not loudly, but quietly. There's a small moment. Someone notices a thought arising. In the past, it would have led to more thinking, more tension, more reaction. But now, it simply passes, and nothing follows. No story, no struggle, just space. And in that space, there is a kind of peace that doesn't depend on anything. Not on solving, not on changing, just on not holding. And maybe this is what you've been searching for all along. Not a perfect mind, not a perfect life, but a way of being where you are no longer trapped inside your own thoughts, where you can experience everything without needing to control it, where you can let things come and let them go, like breathing, effortless, natural, free. And in a quiet moment like this, you may begin to notice something very simple. Your mind is still moving, but you are not as tense as before. There is space now. There is softness. And maybe that is enough. And maybe tonight, you don't need to reach some final state of peace. You don't need to quiet every thought. You only need to loosen your grip. Just a little more, to let your mind be as it is. And in that gentle release, you may begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time. Not because everything is gone, but because nothing is being held. And something within you is finally free. Core message of the video: nothing to hold, nothing to fear. Maybe after everything we've gently explored together, you're beginning to notice something different, that the restlessness you feel at night, the quiet tension in your mind, was never really coming from the world outside. It wasn't just your circumstances. It wasn't just what happened or what didn't happen. It was what you were holding on to so softly, so unconsciously, that it began to feel like a part of you. And now, perhaps for the first time, you can see it more clearly. That peace was never truly missing. It was never something far away, waiting for you to find it. It was always there, beneath the thoughts, beneath the resistance, beneath the holding, covered, but never gone. And maybe the most important realization is this: you don't need to control everything to feel safe. You don't need to solve every thought. You don't need to fix every part of your life before you can rest. You only need to stop holding so tightly, just a little, because in that small release, something begins to open. A quiet space, a soft ease, a sense that maybe things are already okay, even if they're not perfect. And maybe tonight, as the world becomes still again, you don't have to fight your thoughts. You don't have to chase sleep. You don't have to finish every unfinished story in your mind. You can let things remain incomplete. Let thoughts come and go. Let the mind move without following it everywhere. And in that gentle allowing, you may begin to feel something you've been missing for a long time. Not because everything has changed, but because you are no longer holding everything in place. A quiet kind of peace, simple, unforced, already here. If these reflections resonate with you, you might notice that you're not alone in this experience. Feel free to share what you've been holding on to, or what you're beginning to let go of, in the comments. And maybe this isn't something you need to remember tomorrow. Maybe it's something you can feel right now. A small lightness, a quiet space inside you that doesn't need anything else. And even if everything returns later, you now know there is always a place within you that knows how to let go. If something in this space felt real to you, you can gently share it, not to explain, but just to release it. And if you'd like to return to this kind of stillness again, you can stay with us at Buddhist Teachings Audio, where we simply sit with the mind and learn how to let it soften.